The eviction notice was taped to the door when Silas Thorne came home from this third shift of the day. Red letters, bold font, 72 hours to vacate. He stood in the hallway of the Newark tenement, staring at the paper like it was written in a language he didn't speak. Behind him, up 4 flights of stairs that smelled like mildew and someone else's cooking, his daughter was waiting. Wren. 3 years old, blonde curls, sea glass eyes. She hadn't spoken since her mother died. Silas peeled the notice off the door and crumpled it in his fist. Inside the apartment, the heat had been shut off 2 weeks ago. The electricity would be next. He could see his breath in the air. Wren was on the couch, wrapped in 2 blankets and her winter coat, watching cartoons on a tablet with 5% battery left. She looked up when he walked in, didn't smile, didn't speak, just looked. He knelt down in front of her, forcing his face into something that wasn't panic. "Hey, sweetheart, you hungry?" She nodded. He opened the fridge, half a carton of milk, 2 eggs, bread that was starting to turn. He made her a sandwich, cut it into triangles the way she liked, and watched her eat in silence. She used to hum while she ate, used to ask questions about everything. Why is the sky blue? Where did dreams come from? Why did Mommy have to go away? Now she just chewed and stared at the screen. Silas sat down next to her, pulling her into his side. She was so small, so breakable. He thought about Miranda, his wife, the woman who made him believe he could be more than a man who knew how to stop bleeding. She'd been a nurse, sharp and kind, the type who could stitch a wound and tell a joke at the same time. They met at the VA hospital where he worked nights after coming home from Afghanistan. She saw through the wall he'd built around himself, the one that kept people at a distance because distance meant safety. She knocked that wall down with a smile and a cup of terrible coffee. They got married in a courthouse on a Tuesday, had Wren a year later. Life wasn't easy, but it was theirs. And then Miranda got sick. Stage 3 breast cancer, aggressive. The treatments drained their savings, maxed their credit cards, turned their mailbox into a graveyard of medical bills. She fought for 2 years. She almost won. And then, on a Tuesday afternoon, she was crossing Broad and Market when a black SUV with tinted windows ran a red light and didn't stop. The impact threw her 15 feet. She was dead before the ambulance arrived. The police took a report, said they'd investigate. 3 weeks later, they called it a cold case and filed it away with all the other unsolved hit and runs in a city that had too many to count. Silas didn't have time to grieve. The debt didn't stop because Miranda was gone. The bills kept coming, the collectors kept calling, and Wren stopped talking. The pediatrician said it was trauma-induced selective mutism, said it was her brain's way of protecting itself from something too big to process. The therapist said it would take time, patience, and consistent care. Time Silas didn't have. Patience that was running out. Care that cost money he couldn't make. He worked 3 jobs, night shifts at the VA hospital, stitching up veterans who came in with wounds that weren't always visible. Weekend security gigs at a warehouse that paid under the table. Gig economy trash, deliveries, rides, anything that didn't ask too many questions. He slept 4 hours a night, lived on gas station coffee and vending machine sandwiches, watched his daughter shrink into herself like a flower closing at dusk. And now, they were being evicted. Silas waited until Wren fell asleep, then pulled out his phone. 2% battery, 17 missed calls from debt collectors, 1 new email from an address he didn't recognize. The subject line was blank. He opened it. The message was short, no greeting, no explanation, just a single line of text and a set of coordinates. Domestic security specialist, live-in position, discretion required. Compensation life-changing. Interview tonight. Come alone. or with dependents. Reply to confirm. Silas stared at the screen. He'd seen listings like this before, back when he ran with a different crowd. The kind of work that paid in cash and required you to forget names and faces. He'd walked away from that world when he met Miranda, promised her he'd never go back. But Miranda was gone, and Ren was shivering on a couch in an apartment with no heat. He typed one word. Confirmed. The reply came 30 seconds later. Coordinates, a time, and one instruction. Come prepared to stay. Silas looked at his daughter, curled up under blankets that weren't warm enough. He looked at the eviction notice on the counter. He looked at his hands, scarred from years of stitching other people back together while his own life fell apart. Then he picked up Ren, grabbed the only bag they owned, and walked out the door. The drive north was quiet. Ren slept in the back seat, her face pressed against the window. Silas kept his eyes on the road, hands steady on the wheel, mind racing through scenarios he didn't want to think about. The coordinates took him out of Newark, away from the city lights and the noise, into the kind of darkness you only find in places where people don't want to be found. The GPS led him off the highway, down a private road that hadn't been paved in years. Branches scraped the roof of his Honda. The headlights cut through the dark, illuminating trees that pressed in from both sides like walls. And then, suddenly, the trees opened up. Silas hit the brakes. In front of him was a fortress. Stone walls, iron gates, security cameras mounted on posts that looked like something out of a federal prison. Floodlights swept the perimeter in slow, methodical arcs, turning night into day. The manor itself was massive, Victorian Gothic, all sharp angles and dark windows. It looked like the kind of place where people went to disappear. Silas stopped at the gate. A speaker crackled to life. A voice, flat and male, spoke one word. Name. Silas Thorne. There was a pause. Then the gates opened with a mechanical groan that sounded like something waking up. Silas drove through, his pulse hammering in his ears. The driveway was long, lined with trees that had been pruned into unnatural shapes. He parked in a circular driveway in front of the manor and turned off the engine. The silence was immediate, oppressive. He looked back at Ren. She was awake now, staring out the window at the house with wide eyes. It's okay, he said, even though he didn't believe it. We're just going to talk to someone, that's all. The front door opened before he could knock. A man stepped out. He was built like a cement truck, shoulders wide enough to block the doorway, wearing a black suit that looked like it had been tailored to contain a weapon. His face was stone, no expression, no warmth. He didn't speak, just pulled out a handheld metal detector and scanned Silas from head to toe. When he was satisfied, he stepped aside. Silas walked into the manor carrying Ren in his arms. The inside smelled like leather and old money. Dark wood floors, paintings of dead Europeans on the walls, chandeliers that cast long shadows. The air was cold, not from temperature, but from the absence of anything human. The man led him down a hallway, past rooms with closed doors, into a parlor with a fireplace that wasn't lit. The furniture was expensive, antique, the kind of chairs that looked like they'd never been sat in. And then Silas saw her. Bianca Vane sat in a wingback chair, legs crossed, dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Silas made in 6 months. She was younger than he expected, mid-30s maybe, but her eyes were ancient, cold, the kind of eyes that had seen things and decided not to feel them anymore. She didn't stand when he entered, didn't smile, just looked at him the way a jeweler examines a stone for flaws. Silas stood there holding Ren, feeling like an exhibit in a museum. Bianca's gaze moved from his face to his hands to the scars on his knuckles, then to Ren, who was clinging to his neck, then back to his face. You were a medic, she said. Not a question, a statement. Yes. Combat? Afghanistan, 2 tours. She nodded like she'd already known the answer and was just confirming. She stood, walked to a bar cart, poured herself 2 fingers of something amber and didn't offer him any. "I don't need a medic," she said, swirling the liquid in her glass. "I need a ghost. Someone who can exist in my house without leaving a trace. Someone who understands that loyalty isn't a choice, it's a survival mechanism." Silas shifted Ren's weight in his arms. "What exactly are you looking for?" Bianca turned to face him, her eyes were the color of frost. "Take off your shirt." Silas blinked. "Excuse me?" "Your shirt. Take it off. I need to see if you're damaged." "I'm not." "Mr. Thorne." Bianca's voice was silk over steel. "You came here because you're desperate. I'm offering you a solution, but I don't make offers to people I haven't vetted. So take off your shirt or take your daughter and leave." Silas looked down at Ren. She was watching him with those sea glass eyes, trusting him to make the right choice. He set her down gently on a chair, then pulled his shirt over his head. The scars were visible immediately, a jagged line across his ribs from shrapnel, a burn mark on his shoulder from a vehicle fire, smaller scars from stitches he'd done himself in the field when there was no one else. Bianca walked around him, examining each one like a doctor conducting a physical. She didn't touch him, just looked. "Afghanistan did this?" she asked. "Most of it." "And the rest?" "Life after." She stopped in front of him, close enough that he could smell her perfume. Something expensive, something that probably had a French name he couldn't pronounce. "You're not weak," she said, "but you're breakable. That's what I need. Someone who knows what it's like to break and still get up." Silas pulled his shirt back on, his jaw tight. "What's the job?" Bianca walked to the door, opened it, and gestured for him to follow. "Come. It's time you meet what you'll be protecting." They walked through the manor, Bianca's heels clicking on the wood floors, Silas carrying Ren again because she refused to let go. The hallways were long, lined with doors that were all locked. The staff they passed didn't make eye contact, didn't speak, just moved out of the way like shadows. They went up a staircase that creaked under Silas's boots, down another hallway, and stopped in front of a steel door with a biometric lock. Bianca pressed her palm to the scanner. The lock disengaged with a heavy click that echoed in the silence. Inside was a nursery, but it wasn't like any nursery Silas had ever seen. The walls were white, clinical. The furniture was expensive, but sterile. Toys lined the shelves, pristine and untouched, and on the windows, hidden behind curtains that looked soft but weren't, were bars. In the center of the room was a crib, and in the crib was a boy. Vance. He was small, maybe 18 months old, with dark hair and eyes that were too aware for a child his age. He didn't cry when they walked in, didn't reach for his mother, just looked at Silas with an expression that made Silas's chest tighten, because he'd seen that expression before. In the mirror. In the eyes of men who'd learned too young that the world wasn't safe. Vance looked at Silas, tilted his head, and said one word. "Daddy?" Silas froze. Ren stiffened in his arms. Bianca's smile was a blade. "He knows what he needs to know," she said. Silas stared at the boy, his mind trying to process what he'd just heard. Vance wasn't calling him Daddy because he thought Silas was his father. He was calling him Daddy because that's what he'd been taught to say. Like a script. Like a role. "What is this?" Silas's voice was rough. Bianca walked to the crib, looking down at her son with an expression Silas couldn't read. "This is Vance. My son. My only vulnerability. And starting tonight, your responsibility." "Why me?" "Because you're desperate enough to say yes, and skilled enough to keep him alive." She turned to face Silas. "Follow me. We need to discuss the terms." They went back down the hallway, back down the staircase into a different room. This one was smaller, darker. A private office with mahogany furniture and windows that overlooked the grounds. Bianca sat behind a desk that looked like it had been carved from a single piece of wood. She pulled out a contract, slid it across the desk, and gestured for Silas to sit. He didn't. He stood there, holding Ren, reading the first page of the contract. And his blood went cold. This wasn't an employment agreement. It was an ownership contract. "You will reside on the estate," Bianca said, her voice calm, clinical. "You will not leave the grounds without my explicit permission. You will not communicate with anyone outside this house. You will care for my son, maintain his safety, and ensure his development." Silas kept reading. The terms got worse. "You will sleep in the room connected to mine. You will answer every time I call, regardless of the hour. You will not engage with the staff beyond what is necessary. You will not form attachments to anyone outside this estate, and you will never, under any circumstance, look at another woman while you are under my roof." Silas looked up. This isn't a job. This is ownership. Bianca leaned back in her chair. "Yes. You can't be serious." "I'm always serious, Mr. Thorne." She stood, walked around the desk, and stopped in front of him. Close. Too close. "You belong to the Vane Estate now, which means you belong to me. Your time, your skills, your loyalty, all of it. In exchange, your debts disappear. Your daughter gets the surgery she needs. You get a future." Silas's hands were shaking. He looked down at Ren, who was staring at Bianca with an expression he couldn't name. "And if I say no?" Bianca tilted her head. "Then you walk out of here with nothing. The eviction stands, the debt stands, your daughter's condition worsens, and in 6 months, you'll be exactly where you are now. Desperate, broken, alone." Silas wanted to walk away, wanted to grab Ren, get in his car, and drive until the gas ran out. But he couldn't, because Bianca was right. He had nothing, and she was offering him everything. He looked at the contract, at the pen sitting next to it, at the woman who was watching him like a predator watches prey. "One question," he said. "Ask." "Why him? Why do you need someone to protect your son like this?" Bianca's expression didn't change. "Because the world I live in doesn't forgive weakness, and my son is the only weak thing I've ever allowed myself to have." Silas picked up the pen. His hand was steady. His heart was not. He signed. Bianca took the contract, folded it, and slipped it into a drawer. "Welcome to the family, Mr. Thorne." She walked to the door, opened it, and called out, "Gage!" The cement truck man appeared. "Show Mr. Thorne to his quarters," Bianca said. Then she looked at Silas, her eyes cold and satisfied. "Good boy." Gage led Silas and Ren through the manor, up another staircase, down another hallway. They stopped in front of a door. Gage opened it without a word, stepped aside, and left. Silas walked in. The room was large, expensive, a king-sized bed with sheets that looked like they cost more than his car, a window with a view of the grounds, a bathroom with marble counters, and on the far wall, another door. Silas walked to it, tried the handle. It wasn't locked. He opened it. On the other side was Bianca's bedroom. She was standing at her vanity, back to him, removing her earrings. She didn't turn around, didn't acknowledge him, just spoke. "The door stays unlocked, always. If I call, you come. If I need you, you answer. That's the agreement." Silas stood there, his heart pounding, staring at the woman who now owned him. "Understood," he said. Bianca finally turned, meeting his eyes in the mirror. Good. Now close the door and put your daughter to bed. Tomorrow, your real work begins. Silas closed the door. He turned to find Wren standing in the middle of the room, looking small and lost. He knelt down in front of her, pulling her into a hug that felt like the only real thing in this entire house. It's going to be okay, he whispered into her hair. I promise. She didn't answer, just held on tight. That night, Silas didn't sleep. He lay in the massive bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to Wren's breathing in the smaller bed across the room. And through the wall, he could hear Bianca moving, her footsteps, the sound of drawers opening and closing, the faint click of something metallic. He was hyper-aware of her presence, of the fact that only a door separated them, of the fact that she could walk in at any moment and he'd have no choice but to respond. At 2 a.m, the intercom crackled to life. Bianca's voice, smooth and controlled, filled the room. Come here. Silas sat up, his pulse spiking. He looked at Wren, still asleep. He stood, crossed the room, and opened the door. Bianca was sitting at her vanity, a disassembled handgun spread out in front of her. She didn't look at him when he entered, just gestured to a chair. Sit. Watch. Learn. This is what keeps us alive. Silas sat, watched her hands move with precision, reassembling the weapon with the kind of muscle memory that came from years of practice. She worked in silence, her face calm, her movements efficient. When she was done, she set the gun down and finally looked at him. Do you know why I chose you, Mr. Thorne? Because I was desperate. That's part of it, but not all of it. She stood, walked to the window, and looked out at the grounds. I chose you because you know what it's like to protect something fragile in a world that wants to break it. You did it in Afghanistan. You're doing it now with your daughter, and you'll do it for my son. Silas didn't respond, didn't know what to say. Bianca turned back to him. Go to bed. Tomorrow, I'll show you the routines, the rules, the threats, and you'll learn why this house is a fortress. Silas stood and walked back to his room, closed the door, lay down in bed and stared at the ceiling until the sun came up. The days that followed blurred together into a routine that felt more like captivity than employment. Silas woke at 6, fed Vance, changed him, played with him in the sterile white nursery while Wren sat in the corner, humming softly to herself. The staff came and went like ghosts, delivering food, linens, supplies. They never spoke, never made eye contact, just did their jobs and disappeared. Bianca came to the nursery every morning at 8. She didn't play with Vance, didn't hold him, just stood in the doorway watching Silas work, her eyes cataloging every movement. You're good with him, she said one morning. Silas was on the floor stacking blocks with Vance. The boy was laughing, a sound that felt too rare. I raised a daughter. I know how kids work. It's more than that. Bianca stepped into the room. You care. That's dangerous. Caring about a child is dangerous? In my world, yes. She knelt down next to Vance, finally touching him, brushing a hand through his dark hair. Caring makes you vulnerable, and vulnerability gets you killed. Silas watched her, seeing something flicker in her expression, something almost human. Then why have him? Bianca's hand stilled. Because even predators need something to protect. She stood and left without another word. Silas started noticing things. Small things. The way the staff avoided certain hallways. The way the security cameras tracked movement, even inside the house. The way every window in the nursery wing was reinforced. The glass thick enough to stop a bullet. One afternoon, while Vance napped, Silas explored the room more carefully. He ran his hands along the walls, checked behind furniture, lifted the edges of the rug. And that's when he found them. Scratches. Deep gouges in the wood of the doorframe. Old. Deliberate. Like someone had tried to claw their way out. Silas knelt down, running his fingers over the marks. They were filled with dust, painted over, but still visible if you knew where to look. Someone had been here before him. Someone who'd been desperate enough to try to escape. That night, he asked Bianca about it. She was in her room cleaning another weapon. She didn't look up when he spoke. Who was here before me? Several people. What happened to them? They weren't suitable. What does that mean? Bianca set the gun down and finally looked at him. It means they failed, and failure in this house has consequences. What kind of consequences? The permanent kind? Silas felt a chill run through him. You killed them. No, they got themselves killed. There's a difference. She stood, walked to him, and stopped close enough that he could feel the heat from her body. I don't tolerate weakness, Mr. Thorne. I don't tolerate betrayal. And I don't tolerate failure. The people who came before you didn't understand that. You do. That's why you're still here. She walked past him, her shoulder brushing his. Now go to bed. Tomorrow, I'm testing your medical skills. The test came the next morning. Bianca led Silas to a room he hadn't seen before. Inside was a medical setup that looked like something out of a field hospital. IV stands, surgical tools, trauma kits. Show me what you can do, she said. For the next 3 hours, Bianca threw scenarios at him. Gunshot wounds, stab wounds, chemical burns, hypothetical injuries that required quick thinking and steady hands. Silas worked through each one, his combat medic training kicking in, his hands moving with the muscle memory of 1,000 emergencies. Bianca watched, didn't speak, just observed. When he was done, she nodded. Acceptable. Just acceptable? You're competent. That's enough. She walked to the door. But competence without loyalty is worthless. So let's talk about what happens if you ever try to leave. She led him down to the basement. The air was colder here. Concrete floors, bare walls, and at the end of a long hallway, a room with a steel door. Bianca opened it. Inside was a man, tied to a chair, bloodied, broken, barely conscious. This is what happens to people who betray me, Bianca said, her voice calm. This is what happens when you think you can walk away. Silas stared at the man, his stomach turning. Who is he? Someone who thought he was smarter than me. He wasn't. She closed the door. You're smart enough not to make the same mistake. Aren't you, Mr. Thorne? Silas nodded, his throat tight. Good. Now let's go back upstairs. Vance will be waking from his nap soon. That night, Silas couldn't sleep. He kept seeing the man in the basement, kept hearing Bianca's voice, kept feeling the weight of the contract he'd signed pressing down on him like a physical force. He got up, checked on Wren, then walked to the nursery. Vance was awake, standing in his crib, looking at Silas with those dark, knowing eyes. Silas picked him up, held him close, and whispered, I'm going to keep you safe, no matter what. Vance rested his head on Silas's shoulder, and for the first time since signing that contract, Silas felt like he was doing something right. The weeks passed. Silas fell deeper into the routine. Wake, feed Vance, play, teach, protect. Wren and Vance bonded in ways that didn't require words. She hummed. He listened. She held his hand through the crib bars. He smiled. Bianca watched it all. Her presence was constant, oppressive. She called Silas to her room at odd hours, sometimes to talk, sometimes just to have him sit there while she worked. She was grooming him, Silas realized, training him to respond to her voice, to her needs, to her control. and it was working. One night, 3 weeks in, Silas tried to make a phone call. He'd found an old landline in one of the locked rooms hidden behind a filing cabinet. He picked up the receiver, dialed a number he barely remembered, and waited. The line was dead. He tried again. Nothing. He heard footsteps behind him and turned to find Bianca standing in the doorway. "Looking for something?" she asked. Silas set the receiver down. "I wanted to check on a friend, someone from before." "You don't have friends anymore, Mr. Thorne. You have me. You have Vance. You have this house, that's all. You can't just cut me off from the world." "I already have." She stepped into the room, her eyes cold. "Every phone line in this house is disabled. Every internet connection is monitored. Every piece of mail is screened. You're isolated because isolation breeds dependence, and dependence breeds loyalty." Silas felt the walls closing in. "This isn't loyalty. It's captivity." "Call it what you want, but you're still here, and you'll stay here, because the alternative is worse." She walked past him, her hand brushing his arm. "Now come to bed. You look tired." Silas followed, because he didn't have a choice. That night, lying in the dark, Silas realized something. He wasn't just Bianca's employee. He was her possession, and the more time he spent in this house, the harder it became to remember who he was before. The breaking point came in the 4th week. Silas woke at 3 a.m. to the sound of crying. Not Vance, not Wren, someone else. He got up, moved through the dark hallway, and followed the sound to the nursery. Bianca was on the floor. She was curled up in the corner, a 9mm pistol in her hand, her body shaking. Her eyes were open but unseeing, trapped in some nightmare Silas couldn't see. He knelt down in front of her, his combat medic training kicking in. "Bianca, hey, look at me." She didn't respond, just kept crying, the gun trembling in her grip. Silas reached out slowly, carefully, and wrapped his hand around hers. "I need you to give me the gun. Can you do that?" Her eyes focused on him. Recognition flickered. "Silas?" "Yeah, it's me. Give me the gun." She let go. He set the weapon aside and pulled her into his arms. She didn't resist, just collapsed against him, her body shaking with sobs that sounded like they'd been locked away for years. He held her, rubbed her back, counted her breaths until they slowed. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "For what?" "For this. For everything, for bringing you here, for making you stay." Silas pulled back, looking at her face. The mask was gone. For the first time since he'd met her, Bianca Vane looked human. "What happened?" he asked. She wiped her eyes, her hands still shaking. "Vance's father. He didn't leave. I had to dispose of him." Silas went still. "You killed him?" "I had to. He was going to take Vance, use him as leverage against me. I couldn't let that happen." "So you murdered him?" "I protected my son." Her voice was firm now, the mask starting to come back. "That's what mothers do. They protect, no matter the cost." Silas looked at her, seeing the woman underneath the predator, seeing the fear, the loneliness, the weight of living in a world where trust was a weapon and love was a liability. He reached out, touched her cheek. "You're not alone." She leaned into his hand, her eyes closing, and for 1 second, the power shifted. She wasn't the queen. He wasn't the captive. They were just two broken people trying to survive. Then she opened her eyes and the moment was gone. "Go back to bed, Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice steady again. "This never happened." Silas stood and walked away, but something had changed, and they both knew it. The next day, Bianca was different, more possessive, more controlling. She started calling Silas at all hours, asking where he was, what he was doing, who he was talking to. She sabotaged his attempts to connect with the staff, spreading rumors that he wasn't to be trusted. She was isolating him, systematically, deliberately. Ren noticed. "Daddy, why does the lady watch you all the time?" Silas didn't have an answer. One afternoon, while Vance napped, Silas searched the manor. He needed to understand what was happening, needed to find answers. He found them in Bianca's office. The door was unlocked. A mistake, or a test. Silas went inside. The room smelled like her perfume. On the desk was a laptop. He opened it. No password. He searched the files, found folders labeled with names, dates, photos, and then he found one labeled Thorne, Miranda, deceased. His heart stopped. He opened it. Inside were surveillance photos, dozens of them. Miranda walking to work, Miranda at the hospital, Miranda crossing the street, and then the final photo. Miranda's body on the pavement, blood pooling around her head. The black SUV in the background, tinted windows, no plates. Silas's hands were shaking. He kept scrolling, found more files. Financial records, medical records, background checks. Bianca had been watching them for years, long before Miranda died, long before Silas was desperate. She'd orchestrated everything. He heard footsteps behind him and spun around. Bianca was standing in the doorway. Her expression wasn't surprised, it was satisfied. "I was wondering when you'd find that," she said. Silas couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Bianca walked into the room, closed the door behind her. "I needed you broken, Silas. Desperate. Controllable. Your wife was in the way, so I removed her." "You killed her?" "I gave the order. Someone else did the work, but yes, I'm responsible." Silas lunged. Bianca didn't move. Gage appeared from nowhere, grabbing Silas by the arms, slamming him against the wall. "Let him go," Bianca said. Gage hesitated, then released him. Silas stood there, shaking with rage, staring at the woman who'd destroyed his life. "Why?" Bianca stepped closer. "Because I needed you, and you would never have come willingly. So I made you need me." "You're a monster." "Yes, but I'm the monster who saved your daughter's life. I'm the monster who gave you a future. I'm the monster who gave you purpose." She reached out, touched his face. "Does it really matter how you got here, Silas? You're here now, and you're not leaving." Silas wanted to hit her, wanted to scream, wanted to run, but she was right. He couldn't leave. Not without Ren's surgery. Not without losing everything. "I hate you," he whispered. Bianca smiled. "I know, but you'll stay anyway." She walked past him, her hand trailing across his shoulder. "Now clean yourself up. We have a gala to prepare for." Silas stood in the empty office, his world shattered, and realized he was trapped. Not by the gates, not by the guards, by his own desperation. The gala was announced 3 days later, a high society event, criminals in evening wear, predators pretending to be civilized. Bianca explained it over breakfast. "You'll be my security, my shadow, my consort." "I'm not your consort. You are whatever I say you are." She slid a garment bag across the table. "This is what you'll wear, tailored, fitted, expensive. You'll look the part." Silas opened the bag. Inside was a tuxedo, black, sharp, the kind of thing he'd never worn in his life. "I'm not wearing that." "Yes, you are." Bianca stood, walked around the table, and stopped behind him. Her hands rested on his shoulders. "You're going to stand next to me. You're going to smile. You're going to make everyone in that room believe you belong to me. Because you do." Silas closed his eyes. "Who's coming?" "Everyone who matters. And one person who doesn't." She leaned down, her lips next to his ear. "Cassian Thorne." Silas's blood went cold. "The crime lord?" "Yes. He's not coming for Vance. He's coming for me." "Why?" Bianca pulled away, walking to the window. "Because we were partners once. Lovers. And I betrayed him." "What did you do?" "I took everything he cared about and burned it to the ground." She turned back to him. "And now he wants revenge." The day of the gala, Silas put on the tuxedo. It fit perfectly. Too perfectly. Like Bianca had known his measurements before he did. He looked at himself in the mirror and didn't recognize the man staring back. Gone was the medic in flannel and work boots. In his place was someone who looked like he belonged in Bianca's world. He hated it. Wren and Vance were locked in the nursery, protected by guards Bianca trusted. Silas checked on them before leaving. "I'll be back soon," he told Wren. She held Vance's hand and nodded. The gala was held in the manor's grand ballroom. Chandeliers, champagne, men in tuxedos, women in gowns that cost more than cars. Silas stood next to Bianca, watching the room fill with people who smiled like wolves. Bianca's hand rested on his arm, possessive, claiming. "Stay close," she whispered, "and don't speak unless spoken to." Silas nodded. The guests circulated. Conversations floated past, business deals disguised as pleasantries, threats hidden behind compliments. Silas felt eyes on him, whispers, speculation. Who was he? Where did he come from? What was his role? Bianca answered none of it, just smiled and kept him close. And then the doors opened. Cassian Thorne walked in. He was older than Silas expected. 50s, gray at the temples, sharp suit, cold eyes. He moved through the room like he owned it, people stepping aside without being asked. He stopped in front of Bianca. "Still collecting broken toys, I see." Bianca's smile didn't waver. "Cassian, how lovely of you to come." Cassian's eyes moved to Silas. "And who is this?" "My security." "Security?" Cassian laughed. "Is that what we're calling it now?" Silas felt the tension ratchet up, felt Bianca's hand tighten on his arm. "He's more than that," Cassian continued. "He's a replacement, isn't he, for the man you lost?" Bianca's expression finally cracked, just for a second. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't you?" Cassian stepped closer. "You always had a type, Bianca. Strong, damaged, desperate. This one looks just like him. Same build, same eyes, same scars." He looked at Silas. "Did she tell you that you're not the first? That you're just a shadow of a ghost she can't let go?" Silas's world tilted. Bianca didn't deny it. Cassian smiled. "Give me the boy, Bianca, or I'll take everything." His men moved toward the stairs, toward the nursery wing. Silas didn't think, just moved. He intercepted the first man in the hallway. No weapons, just fists and rage. The man swung. Silas ducked, drove his elbow into the man's ribs, heard something crack. The second man pulled a knife. Silas grabbed his wrist, twisted, felt the joint dislocate. The knife clattered to the floor. The third man was bigger, stronger. He tackled Silas into the wall, driving the air from his lungs. They hit the ground. Silas's head bounced off marble. Stars exploded in his vision. The man's hands wrapped around Silas's throat. Silas couldn't breathe, couldn't think, just clawed at the hands, fighting for air. And then his training kicked in. Not the medic training, the survival training. He drove his thumbs into the man's eyes. The man screamed, "Let go!" Silas rolled, grabbed the fallen knife and drove it into the man's thigh. Arterial blood sprayed. Silas stood, breathing hard, staring at the blood on his hands. He'd just killed a man. Again. Cassian appeared at the end of the hallway watching. Impressive. Maybe you're worthy of her after all. Bianca was behind him, gun drawn. She fired once. Cassian's remaining men dropped. She walked to Silas, looked at the bodies, then at him. "Clean this up. I'll handle Cassian." Silas stood there, shaking, covered in blood, and realized he'd become exactly what she wanted. A monster. The gala ended. Guests left. Bodies were removed. The manor returned to silence. Silas went to the nursery, checked on the children. They were asleep. Safe. He went to his room, stripped off the blood-stained tuxedo, showered until the water ran cold. When he came out, Bianca was waiting. "We need to talk," she said. "About what?" "About how you've been lying to me from the beginning? About how I'm just a replacement for some dead man you can't let go of?" Bianca's expression didn't change. "Yes." Silas grabbed her, pinned her against the wall, his forearm across her throat. "Tell me the truth. All of it." She didn't fight, just looked at him with those cold eyes. "There was a man, years ago, my first partner, my first love. He died protecting me. And yes, you look like him, move like him. That's why I chose you." "So I'm what? A ghost? A replacement?" "You're whatever I need you to be." Her hand came up, touching his face. "But you're also more than that. Because he would never have done what you just did. He would never have killed for me." Silas felt something break inside him. "I hate you." "I know." She leaned forward, her lips brushing his. "But you'll stay anyway. Because you can't leave. Not anymore." He kissed her. It was violent, desperate. A collision of rage and need and something darker that neither of them wanted to name. When they pulled apart, both were breathing hard. "I own you," Bianca whispered. "I know," Silas said. And he hated that it was true. Days passed. Silas existed in a fog. He cared for the children, avoided Bianca, tried to pretend he wasn't losing himself, but he was. And then, one morning, he remembered. Weeks ago, before communication was cut, he'd taken a sample, a cheek swab from Vance while the boy slept. He'd sent it to an underground lab through channels Bianca didn't know about. He'd forgotten about it. Until now. He checked his email. One new message, encrypted, from the lab. He opened it. The DNA results loaded, and Silas's world stopped. Vance was not Bianca's biological son. He was Miranda's. Silas read the report 3 times. Checked the numbers, verified the markers. It was impossible, but it was true. Vance was his son. He ran to Bianca's office. She was at her desk working. "Explain this," he said, throwing the report on the desk. Bianca picked it up, read it, set it down. "You've been busy." "Is it true?" "Yes." Silas felt like he couldn't breathe. "How?" Bianca stood, walked to the window. "Your wife was pregnant when she died. She was planning to terminate. I acquired the embryo, used a surrogate, raised him as my own." "You stole my child." "I saved your child. Miranda didn't want him. I did." Silas grabbed her, spun her around. "You had no right." "I had every right. I gave him life. I gave him safety. I gave him everything she would have denied him. You're lying. Miranda would never, wouldn't she? Bianca pulled out a file, handed it to him. Read it. Inside were medical records, consultation notes, a scheduled appointment at a clinic. Miranda had been planning an abortion. Silas's hands shook. No. Yes. She was overwhelmed, broke, scared. She made a choice. I made a different one. Silas looked at the papers, his mind fracturing. Why didn't you tell me? Because you would have tried to take him, and I couldn't allow that. He's my son. He's our son now. Bianca stepped closer. You can leave, Silas. Walk away with the truth, or you can stay. Raise him. Be the father he deserves. Silas looked at her, at the woman who'd destroyed his life and given him back something he didn't know he'd lost. I hate you, he said. I know, but you'll stay. Why are you so sure? Bianca smiled. Because you love him, and love is the strongest cage of all. That night, Silas sat in the nursery watching Vance sleep. His son, not Bianca's. His. Wren came in, climbed into his lap. Are we staying, Daddy? Silas looked at her, at Vance, at the life Bianca had built for them in this gilded prison. Yeah, sweetheart. We're staying. The next morning, Silas found Bianca on the balcony looking out at the grounds. I'll stay, he said, but not as your captive, as your partner. Bianca turned, studying him. Partners share power. Are you ready for that? Are you? She smiled. We'll see. They stood together, looking out at the iron gates, the guards, the fortress that kept the world out and them in. Cassian will come back, Bianca said. Let him. This time, we'll be ready. Bianca's hand found his. Together? Together. And as the gates closed with a final metallic clang, Silas realized he'd made his choice. Not out of desperation, not out of fear, but out of something darker, something he didn't have a name for yet. He belonged to Bianca Vane, and she belonged to him. And God help anyone who tried to take that away. If you made it this far, thank you for watching. Silas's story is far from over, and the secrets buried in the Vane Estate run deeper than blood. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss what happens when Cassian returns, and when Silas discovers the final truth about who Bianca really is. Drop a comment below and let me know. Would you have stayed? Would you have fought? Your thoughts inspire others and keep stories like this alive. See you in the next one.